before you can start effectively using communication skills, you need to be connected to each other. So in this module, we're going to look at the connection between you and your partner, and if it's ruptured, how it can be repaired. If there's no warmth or emotional connection between you, communication is at best probably just an exchange of information. And if the connection is completely broken, communication can be destructive or non-existent. We all experience external stresses in life, the loss of a job, children, sick parents. These are unlikely to be the cause of a relationship rupture, although they can feel like they are. They just add pressure. If you have a strong relationship with good communication, the pressure will be easier to deal with. But if you don't, it can be the last straw and rupture an already weak connection. Imagine what you communicate is like liquid flowing along a pipeline, and the pipeline is your relationship. The quality of the pipeline affects the quality of its contents, and the quality of the contents affects the pipeline. Just like the quality of your relationship affects your communication, and the quality of your communication affects your relationship. Within the relationship pipeline, there are different channels, each transporting a different form of communication. Via the verbal, auditory channel, you send and receive sounds. Verbally, you speak, and non-verbally, you convey other sounds like crying or sighing. Tone, intonation, volume, etc. are also all parts of the messages you send and receive. Then there's a physical channel through which you feel and are felt. You make gestures, change posture, and you touch. They are all communication signals you make physically. There's a visual channel where you might make eye contact and see what your partner is communicating, perhaps when they shrug their shoulders or roll their eyes, for instance. And there's also an emotional energy channel. Emotional energy not only communicates on its own, it also affects all the other channels. Your emotional state affects what and how you communicate. Your emotional energy is like the fuel sending messages along the pipeline in a certain way. And depending on the kind of fuel, it can result in warm and comforting communication, or it can make it cold and bitter, even if there are no words. If you are using words, your emotional energy will affect how they're sent and how they're received. Imagine the energy of someone who's being open-hearted, compassionate, and keen to understand while they speak. And then imagine the energy of someone who is closed, judgmental, and defended. The message and its impact will be very different, even with the same words. Energy and emotion are a much stronger communication than words, which is why it's important to be aware of how you're feeling when you communicate. I love you communicates something very different from I love you. The contents of these communication channels affect each other, and if they don't align when you communicate, i.e. if they contradict each other, you could seem dishonest. If you try to hide your negative feelings by using positive words, for instance, it could feel manipulative. Contradictory messages in the different channels could result in mistrust, confusion, or even fear in the recipient. For instance, if I'm asked what's going on and I reply, I'm fine, my tone is contradicting my words and my words are contradicting my body and my facial gestures. Congruence within and between the channels is essential for good communication, as is positive energy. If my message were congruent across the channels, I might have said, I'm really not fine. So if when you communicate your feelings, or you think that's what you're doing, and your partner's reaction is not what you expected, consider how congruent your communication is and whether you're being honest and clear. When you receive communication, remember that you receive it through your own personal frame of reference, which alters depending on how you, as the receiver, feel and how you're viewing your partner. Your interpretation of the message affects what you think, what you hear, and what you see, and what you send back along the pipeline in return. Be aware of how you're interpreting your partner's communication, and if you're receiving it through a distorted or negative frame, reframe it more constructively before you decide how to respond. Before we look at communication tools, I want you to think about your relationship pipeline and what you pour into it. If your communication is frequently toxic, corrosive, potentially a rupture will occur, which may prevent communication getting along the pipeline at all. If you're trying to sort out a contentious issue by using polluted or unclear communication, the issue itself is going to get polluted and distorted. That's if the communication is even working, which is unlikely if there's been a rupture in the relationship pipeline. Are you aware of what's going on in your relationship pipeline right now? Has there been a rupture? Are you communicating clearly and cleanly? Or is your focus primarily, if not completely, just on the issue and getting your point across? So what needs to happen instead? If there's been a rupture, it needs to be repaired first and the pipeline cleaned up before you try to talk about any issue. When emotional connection is ruptured or is in danger of being ruptured, in other words, if negativity is escalating, the sense of safety and security diminishes, which means any conversation is unlikely to be successful. Any difficult conflict is unlikely to improve until you both feel emotionally safe and secure with each other, which requires a clean, clear, and unbroken relationship pipeline. Reconnection can be made in a heartbeat if you both truly want it, and if you're willing to change your emotional state by replacing resentment and anger with an open heart and forgiveness, for instance. Connection comes from the heart, not the head, and certainly not by expressing opinions. You can create connection by showing genuine curiosity, care, and empathy, which can best be communicated through touch, facial expression, tone of voice, more than the right words or communication techniques. You can reach out to your partner anytime you want to connect more deeply with them, not just amidst a difficult conversation or disconnection. Your gesture can be as small as reaching out a hand, inviting them to tell you about their day, or offering to massage their shoulders. It can also be a useful tool when you or your partner return from a time out. Either of you can attempt to repair a rupture at any time to stop negativity mounting. So don't wait for your partner, reach out and reconnect.